So
Yeah.
we'll get right into it
Yeah,
and get started so you guys can get some more tips, but please feel free to put some more things in the chat
yeah.
as we go along.
All right, so we're first going to start off with the Mediterranean style of eating is widely hailed as one of the healthiest diets, consistently at the top of the US News best diets. People who follow a Mediterranean diet are more likely to be at a healthy weight and are at a lower risk of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Studies also show the Mediterranean diet may help slow cognitive decline and even help you live longer. So it does apply to a lot of disease states, like even diabetes, like it's will fit really nicely with that. So just to give you an idea of what the Mediterranean diet includes, it would be a daily intake of whole grains, olive oil, fruits, vegetables, beans, and other legumes, nuts, herbs, and spices. So what you're getting away from is up and down those aisles in the grocery store of the chips and refined breads and all. Other foods such as animal proteins are eaten in smaller quantities, with the preferred animal protein being fish and poultry. Healthy fats include olive oil, avocados, nuts, and oily fish like salmon and sardines, walnuts, which are all high in omega-3 fatty acids. So you're going to look for those little opportunities. So if you make a recipe and you're like, oh, I need a little more protein, maybe throw some beans in there or some nuts is good. So Mary, some people think that the Mediterranean diet is expensive. What do you think?
Yeah, we do get that a lot, and that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. We get a lot of questions about that. And, you know, especially with these soaring prices now, many families are focusing on ways to cut or trim those weekly grocery bills. So I think a lot of times we think about the Mediterranean diet as being really fancy balsamic vinaigrettes and fancy wine, but it doesn't really need to be that expensive. You can eat like you live in the south of France or a Greek island without breaking the bank. So that's helpful to know that there are other foods out there. And in fact, the Mediterranean diet is, I think that it's expensive, but it really started out as peasant foods.
Yeah, soups, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. So really more of the old fashioned peasant foods such as beans, whole grains, vegetables, those were all included in the meal planning because they were easy to come by and very reasonable. In fact, beans and rice is one of the most reasonably priced meals, providing those essential amino acids. So you've got the grain and the legume, and that gives you the combined protein, the complete protein. So we can take some pointers from the resourcefulness of this traditional Mediterranean cooking. And we don't really need to use meat as the center of the plate.
No.
I like how you mentioned protein, Nancy, because if you start with the protein, then you can kind of add things to it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be meat.
And Mary, I was just going to interject, like, say you do need some beef for a recipe, but it's gotten so expensive. And then sometimes even the look of it doesn't seem that appealing, but you still need a little. So I think you do too. We've just cut like in half the amount of beef we need in a recipe and do more, like I'm thinking more like a stir fry. Put some strips of meat for the flavor, but then load it up with vegetables. Yeah.
Yeah, so this will save on the budget, and you can increase the plant-based proteins in the diet as well. So we're going to talk about how to do that. But you can use lentils or chickpeas, ancient grains such as farro or bulgur, and they're not necessarily expensive. I love farro, for example, in salads or soups, or it's just so delicious. So falafel salad, for example. So falafel is made from chickpeas. It's kind of like sort of like a dumpling, and that gives you some protein. And then you also have the salad for the vegetables. Same with like a vegetarian chili. You can use several different types of beans. You can use beans as an appetizer. There's a great recipe on Living Well website that talks about an appetizer made with beans. You can add peas to a salad to get increased protein. And these are all ways to have those plant-based meals.
So you mentioned chili, thinking Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
We can cut the meat in half and add more beans or a variety of beans to make it a good chili.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like adding like lentils or chickpeas or things like that Those are really helpful too. So what about whole grains? How can you,
Yeah.
incorporate those without going overboard?
Yeah, so you do want to build your meals around whole grains. So a whole grain, it's a grain of any cereal that contains the endosperm, germ, and bran, in contrast to refined grains, which only contain the endosperm. So when you look at a package, and it's got the ingredients, you want to look for the first ingredient to say whole, and then whatever the grain is. Rather than refined wheat flour, you want it to be whole grain flour, or, things like that. So that word whole, W-H-O-L-E, is important to see on your label. So consumption of whole grains is associated with lower risk of several diseases. And whole grains are a source of carbohydrate, but it's the complex type. And it has multiple nutrients and it contains dietary fiber. So, there's a lot of different carbohydrates out there, but the complex are the fruit, vegetables, and the whole grains.
I really like too how whole grains keep you full
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
So you don't need to eat as much if you're getting those whole grains. It takes longer to digest.
Yeah. And when you say digestion, it adds fiber, which helps with digestion too. You know what I mean? Yeah. So quinoa and amaranth are the most nutritious grains due to their high protein content and amino acids. Diets that are low fat, rich in fiber containing grain products, fruits, and vegetables may reduce the risk of some types of cancer. And it ties in nicely with our survivorship that we talk about, switching over to Mediterranean. Other diseases such as coronary heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes may also have a reduced risk of incidence. So it's good, it's a win-win. So whole grains, we want you to limit processed, refined grains that offer little fiber and nutrients. So think of baked goods made with white flour, cookies, pies, but we're not saying you can never have that. We don't like to be, like the food police or something, you just gotta manage it so you don't be gaining weight. But so what I do is like if at work, if someone's birthday and they pass around, say cupcakes, I try to take a pass. But like in my family, if we're celebrating birthday, then I will indulge. But you keep it moderation,
You can also keep in mind too, that you can add whole wheat flour to your refined flour. And then your baked goods are gonna have a little bit more of that fiber and keep you full longer. So that you might just have one cookie as opposed to 2 or 3.
Yeah. So whole grains provide fiber, phytonutrients, and vitamins. Increase use of quinoa, brown, or wild rice. These are all whole grains. Oats, barley, wheat berries, farro, sprouted grain bread, and Ezekiel bread are all good choices. And then with pasta, if you use just regular pasta, that would be more refined, grain. But there's many out there like whole grain pasta, quinoa, edamame, chickpea pasta, and brown rice. Those would be good little switches. So we want you to do things gradually. We don't expect you to just, change the whole way of eating right away. Baby steps, kind of like each different category, tweak it, and try different things. So you want to build your meals around grains, like for example, a breakfast. You can have oatmeal, so that's a whole grain. You can add some peanut butter and chia seeds for added protein. You can even add some berries if you want. Lunch or dinner, you can make like a lentil spinach soup with whole grain pasta, or avocado chickpea salad on whole grain bread or sprouted bread. Quinoa protein patties, stir fry served on brown rice. That's what I do. I love making a stir fry, but I always serve it on brown rice. I don't keep white rice around. Whole wheat pasta with tomatoes. So think of this, like our nature is so beautiful. When you put together, I do like grape tomatoes or cherry and cut them in half, and then zucchini, garlic, red pepper, and olive oil, having it sauteing and then serving it over whole wheat pasta. It's delicious,
Especially in the summer. Right?
Especially now. Yeah. And then homemade soup, when you add brown rice, wild rice, or whole wheat pasta, is also another way to do it. Yes, so let me just see. So Mary, do you have suggestions for making meals more budget friendly by incorporating beans?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, about including lentils, beans, chickpeas. They're all shelf-stable proteins. You can kind of keep these in your pantry, which is nice. I really like using lentils a lot because you can throw a half a cup in your chili or in your soups, and it gives it a little more protein. It also gives it a nice texture. Historically, many people, as we were talking about the peasant kinds of foods, they weren't able to eat meat very often because it was too expensive. So they had to find some protein alternatives. Beans are a great way to stay budget friendly, and meat is often one of those most expensive items in the grocery cart. The other thing you can do is try dried beans instead of canned beans, and it's even a lower budget item. So
These score really nice.
yeah,
right?
so this is a 2 pound bag of beans. We used a 1 pound bag of beans today. And it was about $1, right?
Yeah,
For 1 pound bag of beans. So
Makes
we're gonna talk a little bit about how we use these. And I think a lot of times when we look at this, we think, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be able to do it. It's gonna be too complicated. I have to boil it for a few minutes. I don't know how long. So we've got a real easy crock pot recipe for you in just a minute.
So I was just saying to Mary today, I was kind of thinking back, like growing up, the only beans we had in our meals was baked beans. Or if we made like a taco dip with refried beans, you open the can. And maybe my mom made a navy bean soup or something, but we didn't have
Yeah.
black beans.
Yeah,
you
now we
know.
have so many
Yeah.
choices. So here are some ideas for using beans and legumes in your meals. We talked about lentils in soup, but how about in your pasta sauce? You can fill a wrap with hummus and veggies, or refried beans and lettuce with guacamole. You can make a multi-bean soup instead of using meat. Chickpeas or cannellini beans are something you could use in rice bowls or with pasta. I wanted just to mention that cannellini beans are not as easy to find,
Right.
but they have a creamier consistency. So that's something to really keep in mind, to try to find those for appetizers or in chilies, or even adding them to hummus. And then you can replace ground beef with black beans to make a black bean burger. And lentils are also really good in a black bean burger. They take on that texture so that, like, just like Nancy was saying earlier, you can use maybe half the amount of ground beef
Yeah.
and then use some lentils. At Trader Joe's, they have lentils that are already prepared, so you can actually just open the container and throw them in.
Mhm.
So that's really nice. But the dried lentils you can add to chili and let it simmer for about 15 or 20 minutes, and they're ready to go.
So if you had joined us in December, we did like an appetizer holiday class. We did make a bean dip, Mary's recipe, and we love it. It's super simple, but it uses the cannellini beans.
Very
So
creamy, and you just kind of saute the garlic and the beans together, and then you blend it all, and it almost tastes like a really high-fat dip,
yeah.
but it's beans, so that's
So
awesome.
I'm gonna do a plug too. I think it's February 22nd on Wednesday evening. I'll be doing a beans class, so we're gonna be full of beans by the end of this month. But join us, because we'll have other recipes we can share too.
So we want to switch gears a little bit from beans and go to some other budget-friendly ideas, and one of them is canned fish. So
Yeah.
how do you incorporate that usually, Nancy? I
Yeah.
love tuna myself.
Yeah, we work together closely, and then she's like, I have to warn you, I brought tuna today. Yeah, like, oh boy.
Which is often.
But anyhow, yeah, canned tuna is considered a healthful food. It's very available, and I think we all grew up on it. I love it. It's rich in protein, and it contains many vitamins and minerals such as B complex, vitamin A, vitamin D, as well as iron, selenium, and phosphorus. Tuna is also has healthy omega-3 essential fatty acids such as DHA and EPA, and it's low in cholesterol. So canned light tuna is the better, lower mercury choice according to the FDA and EPA. Canned white and yellow fin tuna are higher in mercury. Water-packed tuna provides greater pure protein and a subtle tuna flavor. Oil-packed tuna has a softer texture and a stronger flavor. So you can use tuna in salads, sandwiches, bowls, or add to a casserole. So in our pantry here, we found, we've had the solid white albacore tuna. So this would be one, maybe like once a week would be okay, considering the mercury content. And Mary and I were just talking that the albacore tuna is a big tuna, and it's a bottom feeder.
Yeah, it's more like, there are gonna be more impurities, and that's why there would be more mercury. So you wanna have just the white tuna, it would be
Yeah.
called. And that one is gonna have less of a mercury risk, so it's okay to have a little bit.
3 or 4 times a week is even okay. So look for the white tuna packed in water, right?
Mhm.
So these are still okay, but just don't eat them every day.
I love those little packets too. They're easy to throw in your lunchbox and they're shelf stable, so you don't have to worry. And they don't have a lot of extra calories because they
No.
don't have mayonnaise and things like that in there, so they're very good.
80 calories, the serving size is 1 pouch and it's 17 grams of protein. Don't they come with other seasonings too? You can get other.
You can get different flavors.
Yeah.
I love the lemon and ginger, and then with the ginger, you're getting that anti-inflammatory, so yeah, delicious.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So then also another canned fish would be canned salmon, and it's very good. It's even more nutritious than tuna due to its healthy omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin D. So it's high in protein, vitamin D, calcium, and omega-3 fats. Salmon's versatile. You can make it into cakes or patties, mix it with pasta or rice. You can bake it into a frittata or a quiche. And this was my suggestion. I grew up this way. I'm talking about my past a lot. But my mother used to make a creamed salmon and she served it over a hot baked potato. And I loved it. And I think we had corn with it too, but it was really good. I served it to my kids and they weren't so thrilled. So I don't know. Who knows? But anyhow, canned chicken breast tends to be low in sodium. It's another canned meat. And then other canned fish would be canned sardines and anchovies. They're also high in omega-3 fatty acids, which has been found to promote heart and brain health. There's also selenium in anchovies, which may reduce the risk of certain types of cancers if consumed regularly. So, Mary, what do you think about greens, using greens in your diet, the diet?
Yeah, greens have so many anti-inflammatory benefits, so if you can throw them in. Tonight, we're using spinach in a couple of different ways.
And
And-
arugula.
And arugula,
Yeah.
right? Spinach is so easy to wilt. So you can throw that in your pan and use it in a lot of different ways. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit. Whole bunches of greens offer a little bit better texture than buying the salad in a bag. But I would say if you can't do that and you want to do the salad in a bag, that's fine. It's however you can get those greens in. And adding a variety is good. You want to have, a lot of times we think iceberg lettuce will be easy and it'll stay in the fridge. That's okay. But if you add some darker greens with it, you're going to get a little bit more of those darker green nutrients. So some of the greens, if they're pre-cut, you'll see them in the salad in a bag. If they haven't been sold for a couple of days, they start to get brown and mushy. And then they're not as appetizing, which means we're not going to eat them.
Well, and I was gonna say too, if you're not a big fan of kale, I always, well, I'm not a big fan, but I like to substitute spinach.
Yeah, spinach is a
Yeah,
great
I love
way.
spinach.
I think
Yeah.
people too don't understand, like with kale, you really need to take out that center portion. It's just too hard to chew. So if you chop that up and you massage it a little bit and use a little, like a vinaigrette with it, it starts to soften up. But you know what else I like to do with it that you might like? Is chopping it up really small and throwing it in a soup. It
Oh,
really softens
I'm
up.
into that. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Small where I don't know what's in
And
there.
there is a baby kale variety that's a
Mhm.
little more tender.
Yeah.
So, check out the different kinds of varieties of spinach and kale. I like the baby spinach too. It's really easy to
Yeah.
use. You really don't even have to chop it. You can throw it in things. Mixed greens like red and green leaf lettuce really provide a variety of colors, which means you're going to get a variety of micronutrients, which is important. So just kind of look for those variety of colors. There's blue kale. You can get red or green Swiss chard. You can make salads with various greens, or you can just throw a couple of slices or a couple of leaves of spinach on your sandwich.
Yeah.
You can add greens to other meals too. You could throw it in your pasta.
Yeah, or soup, throw a handful of spinach in your soup. Mine.
So what about vegetables? Is it okay to use frozen vegetables as well?
Yeah. So this will kind of help tie in with the question we had before. I personally, I find fresh is best to me. If the cost and availability is a factor, then select frozen vegetables for the same nutritional content. But you'll have to look, everyone's individual. Like if you're not able to get out to the grocery store for more than like 2 weeks, then maybe frozen is your better option. So you can keep it frozen and use it when needed. I like to just go once a week if possible. It usually ends up more, and then I get the fresh, and I try to use the high water content vegetables first, so they don't go bad, because your ones that are more like a root vegetable, or harder, like carrots are harder, they stay longer in the fridge. But I went to like an Aldi's and I just got produce. It wasn't bad, it's really, I think that high cost factor is when you're going up and down the aisles and getting the chips and the pre-prepared things. That's where your food, bill goes up.
I really agree with that. A lot of times we're okay when we see a melon for $3.99. You think, oh, that's so expensive, I'm not gonna get it, but we're fine spending a lot more money
Yeah.
on the snack type food. So
Right.
I think it's just a matter of knowing that that's gonna provide you with some good nutrition.
Well, and also meal plan too. Decide what you're gonna make that week, at least rough it out, so you know what to get, and then you can keep track. And usually like a few days before I go grocery shopping, I'll check my produce drawers and think, oh, I've got some of this, and maybe I'll decide to do a stir fry or make a soup, just to keep using it up. Because if you let it where it goes bad and you have to throw it out, you're wasting money then. So, yeah, or even like with like a red pepper. And here's, we cut this in half, but like say you had some brown rice on hand, some corn, some black beans, chopped up zucchini, you can make like a stuffed pepper then with it. And it's another way to use vegetables up. So anyhow, frozen vegetables are vegetables that have had their temperature reduced and maintained to below their freezing point for the purpose of storage and transportation until they're ready to be eaten. They may be commercially packaged or frozen at home. Frozen vegetables do have the same nutritional value as fresh. So really you just have to decide. I was thinking about it. What I have in my freezer might be some frozen broccoli, frozen spinach for sure, and then frozen corn maybe. Because I like to have some quick, easy meals, like I'll make a spinach quiche. So I'll get that frozen spinach out and then go to whatever. Or if I was doing a bowl and I didn't have broccoli, I could use that frozen. It would be fine. So anyhow, how to cook frozen vegetables. So sauteing frozen vegetables on the stove top guarantees the best texture and flavor. And a secondary option is to roast them in the oven or even cook them on the grill.
I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Somebody was asking about sauces, and when you roast the vegetables, a lot of times their sweetness comes out.
Yeah.
And you can use those,
Caramelization.
yes, you can
Yeah.
use those fresh herbs,
Mhm.
and you might not even need a
Or
sauce.
lemon juice.
Yeah.
Squeezed on, or garlic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I rarely put a sauce on my vegetables. I think the question was, can I freeze the vegetables, and what about with the sauce? I mean, I guess it would work if it was already combined with the sauce, but you'd have to just cook it in a saucepan when you're gonna use it again. I would probably freeze the sauce separately. That's what I would think.
Or just freeze the vegetables and then make the sauce fresh, because that
Okay,
way,
that's true too,
you know,
yeah.
that way it would taste fresh. And we do have a sauce today that I made that we can talk about, but some sauces will break apart when they're frozen.
Yeah,
Others will hold together nicely. So, think about, just kind of freezing the vegetables separate. The integrity will stay
Yeah.
better and they'll last longer.
so all three options result in a better tasting vegetable than if you were to boil, steam, or microwave them. So thinking about sauteing or roasting or cooking on the grill would be your preferred ways if possible. And then frozen vegetables can be used in bowls, stir fry, and added to quiche and soups. Season your vegetables with shallots, garlic, and onion. That's a nice way to give flavor. And then rinse your frozen vegetables before use. Vegetables that should not be frozen, so do not freeze: celery, watercress, endive, lettuce, cabbage, cucumber, and radishes. These vegetables have a high water content and become soggy and waterlogged when thawed. And then just to touch on fruits, I mean, these can be frozen, but they don't freeze so well. That would be like melons, like watermelon, honeydew, and cantaloupe, and citrus fruit. The texture changes, it will become, it would be best used in a smoothie.
Yeah, and you can do that where you would puree the watermelon. You can keep it in a Ziploc bag then. But the other Yeah, just like, it's not gonna come out the same if you
Right,
freeze it. It's
right.
gonna lose that texture.
Yeah. So, Mary, typically, I tend to buy chicken breast, but what are your thoughts on purchasing a whole chicken?
Yeah, a lot of times for cancer patients in treatment too, we'll talk about maybe just buying your own chicken because we want to avoid food safety hazards at the pantry or the deli counter because there are extra hands there. But making a whole chicken, I think it's a lot, again, one of those mysteries. People think, oh, it's going to be really hard. And really, for a 3 to 5 pound chicken, it does take 45 to 60 minutes about. But it's not hard at all. And it's so flavorful. Plus, it does, as long as you are home, you smell it throughout the house. And it's amazing. So a lot of times we'll just cut like a lemon in half or an onion in half and then put in like a couple of sprigs of this like fresh rosemary that we have. So, that's all you need to do. You don't have to take all the rosemary off and, it's not a huge process. And, then there are lots of ways that you can use this whole chicken. So buying the cut up chicken is also more expensive. And when you're buying just chicken breasts, you're not getting the whole carcass that you might be able to use in a soup later. So adding all those different benefits for the whole chicken is really helpful. And the other thing you can do is have the chicken one night that's baked, and then the next night you would have the chicken off the bone and throw it in a soup.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, save that carcass, because you could like open up some, I usually get low sodium chicken stock and heat that up. You heat it up to boiling and you put the whole carcass in and let it cook. And then you're gonna strain it out so that you discard the bones then, and you have a really flavorful chicken broth, and then proceed to make your soup.
A little more protein as well.
Right.
Because you're getting protein off of those bones.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do, for our friends that are freezing things, you can take 1 to 2 pound bags of chicken and freeze it, and it freezes really well. And you can use that for a future meal. Maybe you're tired one night and you just want to pull out a pound of chicken and make a little microwave rice and have some spinach and you're done. So really using that, the whole part of the chicken is helpful. That also really helps to flavor like bean soups. If you're not a vegan, you can help it to, that'll give you some good flavor for beans or lentil soups. So you can check out recipes for whole poultry and cookbooks, blogs, websites. Simple cooking techniques can add flavor, like we talked about, adding onions or citrus to that chicken turkey cavity.
Or garlic.
Yeah, garlic, so
Garlic's
good.
good, yeah.
And then you can also add herbs like we talked about. They impart such flavor. I love doing that with roasted vegetables and with chicken. So the vegetables can really garner flavor as well. So if you're doing a pot of chicken, you can throw in some carrots and potatoes, and then you have a whole meal. For the rotisserie chicken, if you're buying the rotisserie chicken, some of them may be higher in fat or sodium, but they're not going to be as high in fat or sodium as if you picked up dinner from a fast food restaurant on your way home.
And some are labeled too, like low sodium.
Right, it
Yeah.
depends on the brand.
Yeah.
So check the nutrition facts label and just make sure that you're aware. It's okay sometimes to have foods that are a little bit higher in fat, and sometimes we need a little bit more calories, especially
Yeah.
in treatment.
Yeah.
So nuts are also a good way to add protein to meals, right,
Yeah,
Nancy?
yeah.
How would you recommend that?
Okay, so it does add protein and it adds healthy fat to your meals. If you had hot cereal in the morning or even a cold cereal, you can top it with some nuts. You can even top like almonds on top of a yogurt, peanuts to a non-fat frozen yogurt. You can use fat-free salad dressing and add nuts to the salad, or use nuts to replace croutons in salads and soups. Sometimes like if you make a pesto, I like to use slivered almonds to make the pesto.
Really? I like walnuts.
Yeah, that too. Yeah,
Either one is
but it
good.
adds some good flavor.
Yeah.
Okay, the key to including nuts in a healthy diet without overdoing the fat and calories is portion control. So I know that sometimes we'll buy one of those big containers of mixed nuts and I'm like, I gotta get home and like put blinders on. I'm not gonna get into them. Cause if you just are mindless at like making dinner and start eating those, you're gonna get a lot of calories before you even have dinner. So you gotta really practice self-control. But I have to say, patients who are going through treatment who might be struggling with their weight, like to maintain their weight, a lot of our physicians will suggest having a big container of nuts right by where you sit, so they can just reach in. It's easy, it's available. So nuts are really good for you. They're anti-inflammatory, so it's a good thing to have. They contain monounsaturated fat, vitamin E, folic acid, magnesium. A lot of patients are low in magnesium, so it's a good source. Copper, protein, and fiber. They're rich in antioxidant phytochemicals.
I think a lot of people don't realize that nuts are high in fiber. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can be good, sometimes bad. Just depends on how your system is going, but yeah.
And speaking of like your system, I would say, digestion starts in your mouth by chewing. It's called mechanical digestion. So when you eat your nuts, like chew them well, you're starting to break down the product. Some people have to be careful about nuts if they have diverticulitis. It's probably not a good thing. So don't overdo it. Everything in moderation is always key. So 1 ounce of nuts contains 160 to 200 calories. 1 ounce of nuts is not very much, so it's like a little handful. But they're a great source. They're one of the best sources of protein from a plant source. But get away from cakes, cookies, and chips and have a portion of nuts. Consider nut butters for a creamy texture and versatility. I know I used to, for a while, I kept a little package of roasted almonds in my car, but then it got to be summer and I thought, it's probably not a good thing having a hot car with nuts in it. So I'm like, forget that idea. And the other thing, nuts can go bad. So, and same with oils. I would make sure when you do have snacking nuts that they don't just get pushed to the back of the pantry, because they can go rancid, and smell them. And if it's got that off, don't eat them. Like, check expiration dates. So if you're gonna have snacking nuts, use them up. And same with baking nuts, like raw nuts. I keep them in the freezer just for that reason. I don't want
Yeah,
to risk it.
they stay fresher and
Yeah.
yeah, then you don't, because nuts are expensive and we're trying to be budget friendly. The
Yeah,
other thing too is I like your idea about portion control.
yeah.
If you have just a few nuts to add to your salad, it really gives it a nice crunch, but you don't need a lot of them.
No.
So that way you can have, a bag of nuts can last a long time.
And we see all the time that walnuts and almonds are really good for you. So that's a nice thing to add to your salads. So Mary, what about fresh herbs? I know right now they're rather expensive, but what about, if you're thinking of spring?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, I brought some information about just starting your own garden or your countertop herb garden in your home.
It's February. Right?
Yeah.
It's a plan. Yeah.
And a lot of gardeners are starting their seeds now so that they can get them in the ground. But, if you wanted to start like a potted herb, that now's kind of a good time to do that too. So we picked up, I showed you some rosemary earlier. We have some fresh dill here and then some fresh basil. And those are all, you can grow those. Sometimes, we didn't find them this time, but sometimes you can find the little potted herbs. That's kind of an easy way to do it. You can actually repot those, but you have to use this kind of seed starter mix. You don't want to use dirt from your backyard. We can't find our dirt anyway right now. But if you had some in your, garage or something, you really need the seed starter mix to help those seeds, because it is less dense, and that way the very small roots can dig down and get the nutrients they need. The other thing to keep in mind is the pot size. So a lot of times the herbs in the grocery stores are in a pot even smaller than this. And this is a good pot to start your seeds, but you don't want to, like basil, for example, you could put in a pot about this size because it'll be 3 or 4 feet tall. So, and it will grow if you have a pot that's big enough. So you want to really make sure that you have room. This one wouldn't be quite large enough. So just kind of make sure that you're not having those roots get too cramped. And then keep it in a warm window in your kitchen. And, you know, that would really save a lot of money. You want to, especially with basil and, you know, the other herbs too, but you want to take the leaves from the bottom of the plant so that the upper part of the plant is still gathering that sunlight so that it can continue to grow.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Microgreens are another thing that are really helpful to have. You can order seeds. I like to use a Johnny Seeds catalog because I know those seeds work. But the microgreens have sometimes 40% more nutrition than its regular counterpart. And they take 2 or 3 weeks to grow. So that's another way to have like microgreens in the winter. So fresh herbs can be a great addition to soups, roasts, casseroles, pastas, sandwiches. I think a lot of times we don't think about using, you know, some fresh basil on your sandwich. And if you have a bunch like this, where you have a whole bunch of leaves, you really only need one leaf. And it will really make your sandwich more delicious, especially in these winter months, right? It's hard to get that fresh grown flavor, and fresh herbs will really help. It also helps decrease the sodium in your dish because there's so much flavor. You really don't need to add a lot of salt.
So before I came in today, they had little cooking shows on WGN. And they'd made some kind of pasta, but I loved how they took the basil and just, you know, garnished the pasta dish with the basil. It looks so pretty and inviting.
And in that case, you can eat the garnish.
Right.
Just chop it up, right, and throw it in.
Edible garnish.
There is some nutritional value as well. Fresh mint can help with digestion. As we know, it helps prevent nausea in some cases, or it helps with those symptoms. Basil may help lower our blood cholesterol, so that's another good. And then microgreens, we already talked about, really do have a lot more nutrition because they're in a small, the nutrition's in a small amount, and you just chop up those greens and throw them right in your sandwich, your
Yeah.
soup, your salads. I like the texture of microgreens too, like in a panini or something like that. It's so
Yeah.
delicious. So another way to really save money is maybe making your own salad dressing. Now,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are intimidated by that.
Well, you know, what would frustrate me is if in your family, if you have all these different bottles of salad dressing in your refrigerator, they take up a lot of space. They can go bad.
And they're expensive.
Yeah, but if you actually look at the ingredient panel on your salad dressing, there's a long list of ingredients that you may not even know what they are. So it's so simple to make your own salad dressing. It's things you already have in your pantry. So some basic ingredients would be like a Dijon mustard, little white or red wine vinegar, olive oil, and pepper. So following those amounts, I do it kind of opposite. I like to do less olive oil and more vinegar. And then there's so many different mustards out there, like horseradish Dijon or just regular Dijon. It depends what kind of robust flavor you want.
That French country
Yeah,
is kind of interesting
But-
too.
I like more of a zingy taste, so that's why I do more vinegar. So here's a vinaigrette, like an Italian one, red wine vinegar, Parmesan cheese, olive oil, garlic, Italian seasoning, black pepper, and red pepper flakes if you'd like. There is a handout in your chat that has all these recipes on it, so don't worry about copying it down.
They're online.
Oh, online, I'm sorry,
Yeah, they're already
online. And then there's also a balsamic dressing. Balsamic's really nice. You see it a lot in France and Italy. And I don't even know if I'd put that honey in there. I would probably just do balsamic vinegar, Dijon mustard, olive oil, and pepper. I don't like things sweet, you know, from a salad dressing.
There's a lot of different balsamics you can use too. Now, some
Right.
of them are really expensive, so you have
The
to kind of.
aged ones are very.
Right. You want to use them sparingly, but you know, maybe that's going to be a
Some
fancy
people-
dinner.
Some people use some of those more expensive balsamics like drizzled on a bruschetta or something like that, but a salad dressing, I would probably use just your regular balsamic because it's getting mixed in with things. So here's some 5 reasons to make your own dressing. It's a healthier option. You have control over the ingredients. It's less expensive than bottled dressing. It's a way to use up herbs because you can throw that into it too. Tastes good. And the best thing about oil-based dressing, you can usually whip them up with staple and pantry ingredients you already have at hand. And then you can top it with fresh herbs, your salad, which add flavor. You can use dill, parsley, rosemary, or whatever you prefer. And you know, there's creamy dressings too out there. I think in the Stetson salad that we're going to show you, the recipe is for a creamy dressing. It's got yogurt and buttermilk. I wanted to just stick to the vinaigrettes, but those are also healthy options.
I do like, there is one prepared dressing in the Marzetti's area called Simply Dressed. And those are almost like homemade dressings. They don't have a lot of ingredients and they don't have a lot of extra calories. Now, they might not be it's definitely cheaper to make it at home.
Yeah.
But if you can't do it, there might be some there, the Simply Dressed in the Marzetti section. They have some good options. They have a lemon vinaigrette and a balsamic.
So we only have about 10 minutes left. So I think let's kind of wrap things up and then we can show our demos real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
So Mary, what about leftovers? You know.
Yeah. In fact, we can kind of talk about that as
Okay.
we're going through the recipes if
Okay.
you want.
So we've got 2 demos here. Mary's going to show you crock pot black beans and then a Mexican black bean bowl with avocado. And then I'm going to do a Stetson salad and how to just demo how to do a salad dressing. So
Okay.
Mary's going to go first.
Yeah.
My leg fell asleep earlier, so I'm okay now.
So we'll let Ashley get you a little bit closer and see if you can't see what we're doing here. You see okay? Okay. So this is our black bean recipe that we had where I just put the bag of black beans. I rinsed them off first in a colander and then you add them to the crock pot. You would chop up 1 red onion and 3 cloves of garlic. You throw it in, you put it in with a quart of water, which is kind of just covering it with water. 6 hours later, you are done. So this recipe is going to be on the Living Well website, and check the culinary nutrition section for all of our recipes. The cannellini bean dip that we talked about earlier is also on there. So, I would, if you're looking for recipes and a recipe book and everything, we have so many. And at least we know we have tried them and they are part of the Mediterranean diet. So I love this bean recipe. We've been using it for a lot of things. So tonight I just made a really simple, I have some brown rice here that was just a microwavable brown rice. So that's really simple to use. And then I roasted some sweet potatoes. So we're gonna add those in. And this is kind of like a black bean bowl. So I'm doing it in a kind of a big casserole so that it could be used for the whole family if you want. And the sweet potatoes are very high in those anti-inflammatory properties, and they add a little bit of a nice texture to the bowl. And then we have some yummy fresh cilantro. And then the spinach that I wilted, you just kind of put it in a non-stick pan for 3 to 5 minutes, and that's really all you have to do. You just rinse it and wilt it, and then you're done. So these are the black beans that we had from the crock pot, and they're so flavorful. The whole Living Well was smelling delicious, and you've got that good plant-based protein, which is yummy. And so you can add a dressing, but I just want to show you for a minute here. Can you look at the colors in there? You've got the greens, I've got some avocado, you've got the sweet potatoes. And then if you want, I just did some like red pepper to give it another little garnish. So you can kind of top it with that. You can chop up the cilantro and put those on too. I'm just going to finish up all the red peppers and stick them on there because it's beautiful. And then I made a little low-fat chipotle dressing, and it has some fresh cilantro in there. I use low-fat mayo. I usually, would use that's not really what I usually use as low-fat products, but this one, it tastes really about the same. And then it just has some low-fat milk to thin it out. And you just take the sauce from the peppers. And so we're just going to kind of drizzle that on, and that's it. So you don't really have to do a lot of prep. And this can be certainly something that you have with leftovers. You have leftover potatoes, you have leftover beans. You could make bean soup with this. The spinach you could just have in your fridge. The avocado, just chop it up and throw it on there for a garnish, and that's about it. So it's a really simple meal. And then Nancy has an idea with these black beans. So we'll walk over and see what Nancy's got going over here.
All right, so I don't want to call this a leftover salad just because I have leftover beans, but I guess you can think of it that way. So after Mary cooked her beans, I swiped some from her, and we're just going to add some protein to the salad. So this is on a bed of arugula, and I also borrowed some of her spinach too. So that's your base, your lettuce. And then I cooked up some quinoa. I happen to use a tricolor quinoa. So this is your whole grain. Just put in a little pot, 3 cups of water with 1 cup of quinoa, and it cooked away. So there we have that. And then you're just going to add some color. So we've got some orange peppers, some red peppers, and then I'm going to add some corn. I'm just using this little corn kernel cutter. I like to use fresh corn if it's available, because it gives you that nice little crunchiness. And even with a soup, it's one of the last things you would add to your soup if you're using fresh, and it gives you just a nice little crunch. So I'm just gonna put some of this along here. Nice corn. I just happened to find some in the grocery store. And then we have some tomatoes. And I just got cherry tomatoes, the ones on the vine, like in our display, and just cut them up. So really pretty. I like arranging it this way because then people can serve themselves like what they like to have in their salad. And then I let people add their own dressing at the end. And then, let's see, we have some cilantro. I just thought, oh, we've got some herbs available, so we'll just sprinkle it on. And then we've got some little dried cranberries too. So this will give a little sweetness, a little chewiness. So you've got a lot of different textures going on. I had read one time that when you're doing things with different vegetables, you want to change the shapes and sizes of the foods when you cut them up, creates a different mouthfeel. And then the last thing is the avocado. I know we're pressed for time. I'll leave it to the end, but I just added just a little splash of olive oil. I don't really measure with this. I just kind of eyeball it. So then I'm going to add, oh boy, brand new one. I'm just going to add some red wine vinegar. I really like red wine vinegar. It gives a nice little pungency. And then we had this on hand. It's Dijon, a coarse Dijon mustard. So I give it a few squirts. And then if you wanted to add pepper, you could, but you can also put pepper on your salad right before you use it. So then I just mix it all up like this, and that's your salad dressing. And so I would portion this into a bowl and let people add their own dressing to it. That's that. And then the last thing I just have to do is cut up the avocado and put it out on here. So Mary, while I do that, do you want to conclude or?
Yeah, we really wanted to just sum up that that's okay. The Mediterranean diet is what we're really focusing on. The more chicken and fish, more fruits and vegetables, and adding those plant-based proteins is really helpful to kind of have more budget-friendly meals. So we hope we gave you some ideas today for these budget-friendly meals, and just kind of keep some of these things in your pantry. Black beans that are in a bag for $1 are certainly affordable, and you can use them in a lot of different ways and also make them beautiful. So you don't need to use a lot of money to get these meals looking gorgeous and also very nutritious, because
it's not vegetarian so much. Mediterranean does not mean it's vegetarian or vegan. It's just using less meats like beef and pork, and have some meatless meals too in your menu planning. So that's why I like to do like a spinach quiche. That's a meatless meal.
I think too that a lot of times we feel like we have to have meat. So if you think about using those plant-based proteins like the black beans, the lentils, the nuts, you find that you're satisfied, you're getting the nutrition you need, and you're still within your budget.
And within the Mediterranean guidelines. I'm just going to add this.
So thanks so much for joining us today. You can see these meals look delicious and they're simple to use. We
And-
hope that you got some good tips from us, and we hope that you guys have a great night. We'll see you